You're listening to the Biz Babes with Soul podcast with your host, Melody Spencer. This is episode 17. Hey guys, welcome to the Biz Babes with Soul podcast. I'm your host, Melody Spencer, and I'm super excited to have my friend Andrea Williams here today. Andi is an amazing innkeeper. That's not a word.
It could be.
Innkeeper and farmer. And she has a beautiful spot that I was lucky enough to spend my birthday weekend at, that she's turning it into an amazing spiritual retreat center. So welcome, Andi.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about you and what you do so everybody can get to know you.
Sure. So as Melody said, I am a farmer and innkeeper. I own Rhino Acres, which is a farm stay and retreat space in Sampson County, North Carolina. And as she mentioned, she came here for her birthday weekend with some of her girlfriends, and we just had a blast that weekend. I think I literally don't think that it felt like work at all that entire weekend, which is like how it should be, and more of that, please, universe. But it was so much fun, and it essentially just kind of redefined for me, or reminded me why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? So that was really cool. But yeah, so Rhino Acres, it's about 17 acres of goat farm. I farm goat. I have goats. I raise goats and donkeys and horses. I have a couple of pigs and a rabbit and some chickens as well. And we have, I'm just really passionate about the farm to table movement. And so this whole thing kind of started because I was like, well, what were my favorite things about like growing up on a farm and about like, you know, being in this kind of agricultural community. And I think it was just like time spent around the table and like I love food. So that's probably a big part of it too. But I was also just like the most memorable times of my life kind of started with like sitting around a table and the conversations that we would have. And you know, the food plays a big role in that. The people play a big role in that, and the space plays a big role in that. And I wanted to bring that to the masses. So that's kind of where Rhino Acres was born.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful vision. And if you guys ever get an opportunity to go there, it's such a beautiful space. The house is gorgeous and like historic and super like, you can just feel like love in those bones of that house. So,
yeah. And no ghosts, right?
Yeah,
like,
no
let's
ghosts.
just clarify that for the
Wait,
masses.
I thought you said there was a ghost.
At one point there was. I will neither confirm nor deny whether she's still here. But.
Yeah, let me clarify. We did not encounter said ghost. We just heard stories.
Yeah. I mean, it's a 250-year-old house. So, you know, you would imagine that there's some stories in these walls.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a passion project, and it's finally at the point now where it's kind of ready to share with the world. And so, you know, you guys were lucky. You kind of came here kind of in the middle of the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have a really good like before and after experience to share. Because I'm sure you'll be here again very soon.
Oh yeah. I want to come back. Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
We gotta go play with baby goats.
I know. Oh, and they're growing so fast. So like, get on that, right? Yeah. So what's up?
So let's backtrack a little bit how you got to where you are now. So the heck did you end up on a farm
Sampson County,
in the middle of North Carolina?
Yeah. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. I wasn't always a farmer. We're definitely not an innkeeper. And I was actually if we went back 4 years today, I was living in Boston, and I was working downtown in Back Bay, for a large insurance company in their legal department. And my life looked completely different from what it looks like today. And, if you had told me that I'd be farming and living in North Carolina 4 years from that day, I would have probably laughed at you, because that was so far off my radar that, it just seemed crazy. But my dad was actually trying to start this little goat farm in New York State, and he had farmed my whole childhood. I grew up in South Africa, and the 80s and 90s in South Africa was a very tumultuous place, as the government was changing. And, there were some really important things that had to happen in that country, and some very old and outdated notions that were persisting. And unfortunately, big change like that often comes with a lot of violence. And so we were targeted a couple of times through my dad's business and also on our farm. White farmers in South Africa were having a lot of farm attacks against them. There was kind of a movement to kill the boer, which translates to kill the farmer. And we and many other people we knew actually suffered under that and continue to suffer under that today. So when my dad got a chance to take a job off the farm and moved to New York City, moved to the New York City office of that company, he took it, and we ended up moving to New York when I was from New Jersey, right outside New York City, when I was 14. And that kind of really shaped who I am as a person. Because being 14 is weird enough, right? And then you add being from a different country and moving to a really small school system in the suburbs, So it was a really interesting transition. And, I made the point right away to really embrace American life and embrace American culture, to the detriment of things like my accent, because I don't sound South African anymore.
Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. And, it was one of those things where I had a funny haircut and I had a funny accent, and I was kind of awkward, who's not awkward at 14. So
exactly, right?
So the easiest thing to change and to fit in more was the accent, right? Because the hair took a while to grow out and all that stuff. And so I just wanted to fit in. So anyway, I watched a lot of 90210 and tried to emulate how they were talking. And so I became this little New Jersey girl with this California accent. So that was wild. But anyway, so I started working as a project manager, e-learning manager. I ended up getting a master's in educational technology from Boise State University. And I just really dove into kind of the human development side of things, right? What does it take for people to change habits? What does it take for people to change, their the way they view the world? How they differentiate between right and wrong. So that was kind of the focus of my learning and development work. 4 years ago, working in learning and development within the legal department at this insurance company, I was just farming was so far from my radar, right? Yeah. But my dad was starting this little farm in New York, and he had, gotten back into it after all the years working in New York City. And he was just loving it and just relishing being back in that world. And I would go on the weekends and hang out at the farm and help him muck stalls or trim goat hooves or, do some of the chores that he had to do. And it was just magical. And I started kind of just thinking about someday I would like to have something like this, right? Like someday I would like to have a little farm and have some goats and maybe some cows, and because I love cows, and maybe a horse or two, and kind of sending, as Abraham Hicks would call it, rockets of desire, right, for that. But it was a long ways off, and I usually had gray hair, like in my visions. So like it wasn't something that was imminent by any means. And then in March of 2015, my dad died really, really unexpectedly. And it was literally out of the blue. It was very traumatic. The circumstances of his death were traumatic. The aftermath was traumatic. And it kind of shook my family to the core. But the thing that kind of was constant throughout all of that was that the goats needed care, and that the farm had to go on. And so I ended up spending every weekend for that first year after he died, driving from Boston to New York to farm.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was fun. It was like 5 hours each way.
Good Lord. Oh.
But it gave me, it's a hike, but it gave me like a lot of time to think about what I was doing with my life. And I realized, like now in retrospect, that I was just kind of floating along for a big chunk of my life. Like I did the master's degree, and I got the promotions at work, and I did all that stuff. I was professionally single, that's how I like to call it, for like a good chunk of the last 10 years. And, if there was someone who was on my radar, like I pursued short-term relationships, but nothing serious, And so it gave me a lot of time to think about what I was doing with my life and like whether that was really what I wanted. And, I think by about August, so about 6 months into that whole ordeal, my mom said, your dad and I looked at this farm in North Carolina as a retirement property, and would you want to go take a look at it? And I said, yeah, that sounds good. I haven't been to North Carolina in a long time, so like that would be cool. And so we came down here. It was August, and you live here. August in North Carolina is miserable. It's so hot.
Don't live here. It is sweltering humidity.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And like you're over by the beach, so like you still have that sea breeze a little bit of the time. Up here, about 45 minutes north of where you are, like there's no breeze in August. If there is a breeze in August, it's probably a tropical storm or a hurricane. So like get out of the way, right? So anyway, so we pulled into this driveway, and I looked at the house, and I was just mesmerized right away. And like you could barely see the house because the yard was so overgrown. But it was just this massive old farmhouse, and I was looking at the front door, which I later learned is the original front door from 250 years ago. But that's a whole different story. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was looking at the front door, and I was seeing women walking into the house, and it was so vivid that I almost said to my mom, like, do you see, like, who are those women, right? And then I saw these like giant, beautiful blue monarch butterflies coming out of the front door. And not to get like too wooey on this, but like I knew I was having a vision, and I knew, and that was kind of like when I heard God's call for me the first time, right? Like when I clearly heard, like, this is my plan for you, right?
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, it was a very powerful moment, and I have chills right now, like just thinking about it. But yeah, so we toured around the farm. Couldn't really see much because it's so overgrown, but at the end of the day, when the owner said, would you be interested in pursuing this, I, without hesitating, said yes. And then like reality kind of set in, right? Because like I'm not a farmer and I hadn't planned to like purchase property or do any of that stuff. So like my finances wasn't necessarily what it needed to be in order to make this work. I wasn't a business owner. Like I wasn't entrepreneurial in that sense. Like I couldn't really see how that all would work. But I went back to Boston and I kind of sat on the decision for a while. And I actually told my roommate at the time, like literally the day I got back, I was like, look, there's a really good chance that next year sometime I'm going to move to the farm and do this. And she was like, well, that's great, because I'm thinking about doing an MBA in Australia. And I was like, oh, good. So at least we'll break our lease together. So so we kind of like both were secretly rooting for each other and holding the vision for each other. And I didn't tell anyone at work up until my final review the next year, which was like in January or February. And I was about to tell my boss, like give her my 2 weeks notice. And she said to me, I know you've been like thinking about doing this farm thing. And I said, how do you know that? And she's like, I don't know. I just had a hunch. And I said, okay. And she said, so, we've been talking, and would you want to work remotely?
Oh, wow.
And I said, wait, what? Like that was so out of the blue, because we don't do that at our company. Like that wasn't even a thing yet. And I mean, it came with its own challenges, but I was literally the first in my entire global department to work remotely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was awesome. And frightening. But anyway, so by April of that year, I was on the farm full time and, just cutting open fence lines and trimming trees and bushes and renovating the house, which is a whole different story for another podcast. Let me just tell you, when you start digging into 250 years of occupancy, you will find a lot of things that will test your definition of humanity. I mean, it's been incredible. Just the stuff I learned about myself and the stuff I learned about the history of this area and, my history. And my goal from the start was just to restore this place to what it once was, which is a really beautiful, huge manor house. And that vision, but I held that vision of women coming here and transforming kind of the entire time and throughout it all. And in August of last year, I kind of had like a crisis of faith, because I had started this business and to try and kind of supplement income. And it was my dad's business that I kind of rekindled after his death, because he had like an established customer list. It was a goat hauling or livestock transportation business. And I wanted to rekindle it because he had this rabid following of customers that were just constantly like, we love your dad. Are you going to do this? There was a huge need. We just want to support your family in anything you guys are doing. What are you going to do? Are you going to do this? And so finally I was like, I got a truck, I got a trailer, I know how to drive, like I can do this. Long story short, about a year later, closed the doors on that business for good. It was not for me. And it came with a whole host of kind of like, mindset issues too, about closing it and, what I did to my dad's reputation, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, it kind of came as like a wake up call for the fact that I was kind of trying to delay this dream, right? Mm-hmm. This dream of doing this like farm stay and retreat business and just like going all in on it. And so the second I made that decision that this is it, like I'm not dilly-dallying anymore, I'm not messing around anymore, it just started happening. which is really, really cool and kind of frightening at the same time because I was like, oh, it's real now. But yeah, like I held that vision, and we're at this stage now where we're booking about, so we'll finish the full transformation of the space or the full renovation probably this summer. And so, yeah, I know it's been 3 long years. But at the same time, like I said, 250 years worth of occupancy to undo, so it'll be done this summer, and we're getting to the fun part of the decorating and stuff now, so that's been good. And we're like at the point now where we're starting to book out for the end of this year and early next year and stuff, and so it's getting really exciting now, and the vision is all kind of coming together, which is awesome.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm stoked.
So what did that look like, that decision-making process of like, okay, I'm finally going for this? Like, what helped you in that space?
Honestly?
Yeah.
Like just being so broke and heartbroken over how everything ended with the other business that I started looking for a reason, right? Like financially broke. Yeah, sure. Cause that business costs a lot of money. My dad would call it tuition money, right? Cause it has had as many like lessons as it did, anything else. But it was literally like I was broke and I needed to figure out why. Because, I still had that full-time income. So arguably like I had a bunch of like money stories about, I make money and like, how come I can't pay my bills, And, but then I was like, no, there's something at work here and I really need to look at it and figure out what it is. So I actually invested in mindset coaching, and that was a huge game changer for me. We started looking at kind of the beliefs that I held that told me like I couldn't just make a living from farming, right? I couldn't just make a living from having a farm-based business. And I couldn't, I would never make money because that was not something that my family did. That was another one. Or I would always have so much debt because that's like the way it is for farmers, right? Farmers live off debt was another one. And like, I'm not really a farmer because I, just decided to be one day. Like I had to pay my dues, quote unquote. So I had all these stories that were just like dumb, in the end. Like I think about them now and I'm just like, gosh, who was that person that thought all those things? Like how much did she hate herself, But I started really doing the work on that. And I think that that's when, I started going really deep. And I have to say that like, it started out as a crisis of faith. Like it started out as me looking literally in the field on my knees, screaming at God, saying, you brought me here. I left my life and came here. And now look at me. And just being so broken and so wrecked and saying, what is the purpose of this? What was the point of all this? And from that, like really broken place, I was able to kind of reconstruct who I really am. Like I tore off all of the different kind of layers of things that I've been told and that I started believing because of my experience, and just rebuilt the person God was asking me to be. Like almost a year later, I am in a much different place. I am no longer kind of focused on what I don't have, but just kind of looking at what I do have, every day. And as I'm looking at it, it's multiplying, which is amazing. It just all really kind of started with that moment of truth and like having to look at my life and really consider, if this is what I wanted, like why, if this is what I wanted, why wasn't I pursuing it,
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about that same thing today about how our limiting beliefs and our blocks kind of can become our identity and we don't
Mm-hmm.
even notice it. Like for
Mm-hmm.
so long you can just tell yourself, "Oh, I'm bad at this," or I'm I don't do that because that's not me, when it's not necessarily you. That's
Right.
just a thing that you've built into your life and you think it's part of your DNA now, and it's not.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah. It's amazing but it's also amazing how quickly you can strip off those things, right? Like
mhm.
as you start thinking about them, some of them you can literally just like decide, I don't believe that. And then you don't believe it because it's not true, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it all starts with the decision to take a look inside, I think.
Yeah, it is amazing as soon as you decide, you make that decision that
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be successful, I'm going to make this happen. Something shifts spiritually or whatever
Yep.
you believe, like something shifts,
Yep.
you know?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
so what kind of, everybody has one, at least most everybody I've talked to, what is your morning practice or routine like that kind of gets you started for the day?
Ooh, I like that question. I was just thinking about this morning. And how I like don't remember who this person, like I didn't realize this was happening, right? But like today I'm like, who am I? So I wake up early, and for non-farmers it's probably like really really early, but it's kind of late by farming standards, I guess. But I wake up around 6:30 most mornings, and my very, very first thing that I do in the morning is I pray, and I just pray over my day. And you know, some people are triggered by the idea of prayer. It could be just meditation, right?
Mhm.
But so I pray over my day, over my loved ones, over my flock. Literally just pray for guidance and clarity. And then I meditate for about 20 minutes. And I actually, I, I take my supplements and do, you know, that kind of stuff. And then
Mhm.
I'll try to work out for like 30 minutes or so every day, whether it's just like doing a quick yoga practice or rowing or walking around the farm, sometimes running if I feel ambitious. But that's kind of a new thing. I used to work out all the time when I was living in Boston because I played semi-pro Australian rules football. So I was constantly running back then, but not so much since moving here. So I'm just kind of trying to reestablish that habit. And then before I start my workday, which is usually around 8:30, I just sit down and I do a gratitude journal. And I actually I thank God for everything that I have, but also for things that I want, right? And that I want to bring into reality. And so I just thank him for, you know, the manifestation of my desires. And then I start my workday, and I didn't always do that. There was a long period of time where I would roll out of bed and quickly brush my hair and brush my teeth and like start my day all within like 15 minutes, my work day. And I hated everything when that was the case, right? So I knew I needed to be more intentional in my mornings, and that's been a habit for 2018 that I've been working on. And everything has gotten a lot better, actually, surprisingly, when I started doing that. So it's been good.
Yeah, it's surprising how I'm the same way. I used to hate having a routine, but now that I
Mm-hmm.
have one, it's like changed my outlook on the day.
Yeah, for
And
real.
when I don't do it, I feel like weird. I'm like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay, because
Right,
I don't always do it on the weekends, and then I'm like,
right,
oh, I didn't journal, or I didn't, you know,
right,
meditate, or I didn't, whatever. Like,
right. Right. And it's funny because like journaling used to be my nemesis, right? Like I hated journaling. I thought it was the most pointless thing in the world. I'm a much more like action oriented person. So I wanted to do. And I just like, now I kind of don't recognize this person who likes to pull out her journal and write things in it. It took me really like figuring out what worked for me in terms of journaling, because I've tried different like suggestions from people, like journaling with prompts and journaling through like blocks, and journaling as like a morning pages type of thing. So I kind of just had to like figure out what my preferred combination of those things was. And now like you said, I can't imagine my life without it.
Yeah, that's so true. So what would be one piece of advice that you would give a newbie entrepreneur listening to this? One thing you would tell her, hey, this is what I would do if I was in your shoes. Don't make these mistakes, or, something like that.
That's a hard question, but an easy question too, right? It's hard because it's so individualized for people, but it's easy because I feel like there's only one true answer for it, right? And like that might sound like a really cocky thing to say, but the one thing I would tell you to do is to trust yourself, right? Like, you know what you need. Everything you need is inside you already. And I know that sounds like a cliche. I know you probably heard Deepak Chopra say it a million times, and Oprah and all of those gurus, but literally, like, you know 100% what you need in order to be successful, and it's called your intuition. And when you tap into that, everything changes. And when you start trusting and loving yourself, everything changes. So yeah, if you feel that nudge, go for it, because that's your God you talking to you, like that's your higher self talking to you.
Do you feel like your intuition is what led you to what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And I wanted to deny it. All my stories and beliefs told me that I could never achieve like my financial goals, like doing this. My social programming told me I couldn't achieve what I wanted to achieve in life doing this. And I realized afterwards that like, even just saying yes to coming to look at this farm, even just the simple act of saying like, I don't want to sell the goats yet, to the hundreds of people that approached us, after my dad died, about buying the genetics that he had, just like that simple act. I didn't know why I said no. The easy thing would have been to just continue like to sell and be done with it. And my mom would continue to live in New Jersey, and I would continue to live in Boston and build my life there. And that would have been the straightforward, easy thing to do. And it would have been the thing that made sense at the time. But literally just like listening to the little voice that said, no, I don't want to sell. And then seeing where that breadcrumb led me, I always found the next breadcrumb. And I think that's the key message, right? Like, just look for the next breadcrumb. Yeah. You don't need to see the whole trail. Just look for the next one.
I love that. It's so true. Sometimes we get bogged down in trying to see this whole big picture, and all you need to do is just kind of follow that trail and just trust that it's leading you in the right direction.
Yes, absolutely. And that trust is hard, right? Yeah. It's hard to trust because it feels unsafe. It feels stupid sometimes. It feels like you're doing something that like is gonna harm you, right? That's like our fear mind talking. But at the same time, like, literally just focus on that one next breadcrumb.
That's great. So if people want to find you and learn more about coming to do a retreat at Rhino Acres, where can they find more about you?
So it's real easy. You can go to our website. It's www.rhinoacres.com. You can find us on Instagram or on Facebook. The profiles are both Rhino Acres. or soon to be on Pinterest. That profile is also Rhino Acres. So you can kind of find us everywhere. And if you are interested at all in coming to check out the space or like hosting your own retreat here, that's what we do. We love it. And it's just so much fun. So
it is. You guys need to come join them for this beautiful place.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And go check it out before it blows up into like the coolest thing ever that everybody wants to go to.
That's awesome. I love that. Yes and amen, she says to that. Awesome. Yep. Definitely come check it out before we get cool, guys, because it's going to happen.
It is.
Yeah. No, I'm so stoked about it. It's really great. And thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
This has been great. I'm so glad I love not only having people I haven't met before, but people I am already friends with, just because I don't know, it's a different level of talking about stuff.
Oh yeah, for real. And then, like, I feel like I even learn about you, even though you lead the conversation, like how you ask questions has been really interesting to me. So,
that's good.
We'll discuss that more another time. No, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'll talk soon. All right.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining me for the Biz Babes with Soul podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. To learn more about me, Melody Spencer, and the show, please visit swiftlysocial.com.